Hi there, I'm James McGregor, publisher of the Silicon Valley San Jose Business Journal. On November 29th, the Business Journal, in partnership with the law school at Santa Clara and the law firm Alston & Bird, hosted our inaugural Secrets of Success of Corporate Counsel event. What you're about to watch is the video of the breakfast program, and as always, I'd appreciate your comments. You can email them to me at jmcgregor@bizjournals.com. Thanks and enjoy.
James did an excellent job of setting the table, so I'm going to jump in here and get down to what you all came here to hear about, which is the secrets of success for some obviously capable and successful lawyers in-house. My job is an easy one. I devised some questions. I circulated to the speakers. Last night I threw all those questions out and came up with a whole new set of new ones. No, not really. But I'm sure if I had, that this group, everyone is used to answering hard questions, and in difficult settings they would be able to do that. So in any event, we have a few questions, and I thought I would pose them to our speakers, our panelists, and I'm going to start off with Sharon, and maybe pose the question, would you, and then I'll have, after your remarks, ask each of our panelists to respond to this question. Would you briefly describe your career path from law school to your current position in-house as general or corporate counsel? What attracted you to working in-house? Were there mentors along the way that helped you chart and obtain your goals? And what were the chief obstacles or roadblocks you experienced along the way? I think that an evidence teacher would object to that on the basis of multiple or fractured questions in there. So you can work on any of those or all of those, but we'd really love to hear how you got here today.
Sure. Is the microphone on? Can you hear me okay? It is a little compound and complex, but I'll see what I can do with that. Thank you, Dean. Okay. And thank you, Alston and Bird. This is a shameless plug for Santa Clara University, but I will say that 3 of my mentors have graduated from Santa Clara University, so I am in awe of the courses that you offer and the graduates that you have here. And I wish I had accepted your offer to come here now, knowing those 3. When I was in law school at University of San Francisco, I found that my parents cut off the dole, and so I had to get a job. And so I went to work for a small litigation firm that did employment law after my first year of law school, when I realized that the bank account had run dry. And I ended up staying with that law firm after I graduated from law school, and it specialized in employment litigation. And our claim to fame was we defended Marty Greenstein in the Baker McKenzie sexual harassment lawsuit. So that was a good case to cut my teeth on. As you can imagine, there were tons of motions and tons of discovery and lots of interesting questions back then. But after that, I came to realize that I did not like the pace of litigation, and I did not like the confrontational aspects of litigation on a day-to-day basis. And so I began to explore other options, and really, the stroke of luck, I opened the journal one day, and there was an advertisement to go in-house for applied materials, and I thought, well, what the heck, I'll throw my resume into the barrel, and several weeks later I got a very hard-to-hear voicemail on an old machine that you had to actually push the button to get the machine, and I attempted to call back the person because the number was very hard to hear. We ultimately made contact. She was a Santa Clara grad, and I went to work for her in 1996 at Applied Materials as a junior attorney. At the time, Applied Materials had grown from 1,500 to 15,000 employees in the course of, I think, 4 to 5 years. And so it was a little bit of, of cowboys and craziness. So when I got to Applied, we had 50 discrimination complaints. And so I spent the first several years dealing with those. As the world has changed and as Applied's business has changed, the course of my career has changed. The company is much more global than it was when I joined in '96. Most of our business is in Asia. So a lot of our focus is in Asia. And over the course of time, my mentor, who is the Santa Clara grad, she ultimately retired. And 1 week into my first maternity leave, she called and said, "When you come back, I'm going to be retiring, so it's all yours." And as I held my now 9-year-old daughter, I thought, what have I gotten myself into? So in addition to her, after she retired, I began reporting directly to the general counsel, who is an amazing attorney and an amazing mentor, not a Santa Clara grad. And we have charted a great course. He actually is retiring as well after 20 years with Applied, and we have a new GC as of this week. So I'm very much looking to charting my course with him next, or onto whatever comes next. So hopefully I hit some of the questions on that. I see Brian taking notes, so maybe you can help me with anything I forgot.
Okay. Brian?
Yeah, my story won't be as long as this beginning suggests, but the idea of becoming a lawyer occurred to me when my father, who worked at a factory in Buffalo, New York for 20-something years, was laid off quite suddenly. And so while he was laid off, my parents would go to the city courthouse and sit in the back and watch trials. You know, for those of you that are litigators, those were my parents, the people that sit in the back. You can't really figure out why they're there. Maybe they're a witness, you don't quite know. Those were my parents, and a couple times they brought me with them, and that was the incubation of the idea of becoming a lawyer. And flash forward to working in Pittsburgh, where I did have the opportunity and the pleasure of working on the Markman case, although losing every step of the way. But it was interesting because it was the advent of litigators actually being involved in patent disputes, patent litigation. Before it was the patent lawyers would be involved, and that always resulted in sort of some interesting questions from the patent lawyers as to how to manage certain fundamental parts of trials. So the litigators, I think, saw an opportunity, and so that was my background. But I got a friend of a friend said there was an opportunity at a company called Sun Microsystems. I had no idea what they did. Or there was a Sun appliances in my neighborhood that was like a Fry's kind of thing, and I thought maybe that was it, but it wasn't. But the idea of being in-house for me was about the fact that there was an opportunity, especially coming from a litigator standpoint, of helping steer the ship rather than just dealing with shipwrecks. And I found that to be much more gratifying and helpful to a business than flying in, parachuting in, helping on an issue, and then getting out. And so one of the amazing life experiences that I had was working at such a terrific legal department. There were 3 general counsels there while I was there. The first was Mike Morris. And coming from Pittsburgh, where we were very formal, suits all the time, and it was a very formal way of practicing. Mike Morris, the first Sun general counsel, would show up every day in jeans and a flannel shirt, which is a classic Silicon Valley substance over form approach, right? Very laid back, and this was sort of an eye-opener for me. And then mentored by John Kroll for many years, and then the now current general counsel of Adobe, Mike Dillon. And all have different strengths, and I took a little bit from each of them in terms of how to be an effective in-house counsel, which we'll get into. But KLA Tencor, I guess the Sun Microsystems opportunity, having so many lawyers being encouraged to do different things and to take on different roles at the company, allowed me to sort of be in a position to be a credible candidate for the GC job at KLA Tencor, and been there now for 5 years.
Wonderful. Thank you. Andrew?
I originally had never wanted to work in-house or for a corporation. Originally, going to law school for me was just a way of being empowered. As an immigrant, I felt the law and higher education was one way to, number one, economic success, but also just being part of the system. Being in law school, I clerked for the DA's office, and I was caught with the bug of just loving being in court. So I naturally graduated from law school wanting to work in public sector. I worked for the city attorney's office. I worked for the district attorney's office, and I enjoyed trials. I enjoyed just going to court often. And I was an accidental corporate lawyer. It was on the year 2000 during the internet boom. And I responded, like you, to an ad in a newspaper. Back then, you looked for jobs in the back of the newspaper. And I responded to an ad for a position for PlayStation to manage litigation. And I applied also to 3 other positions. Back then, every lawyer wanted to become a biz dev manager. And I remember I ended up getting 3 offers for biz dev jobs at internet startups. And I also got the job at PlayStation. And I started in the year 2000 at PlayStation knowing nothing about contracts or transaction other than offer acceptance and consideration equals contract. And the rest was history. And I find myself now, 12 years later, having been practicing in tech for the last 12 years, I realize that you can be in-house and you can be a corporate lawyer and still be involved and engaged and active in the community. And it's been a rewarding experience working in a diverse community such as ours.
Great. Thank you. Sam?
Yeah, so my path in-house actually started right here at Santa Clara. I did go to Santa Clara Law School. As a student here, I was obviously influenced by the emphasis on IP at Santa Clara, and I had some great professors here, including Tom Schatzel, who's sitting at the Santa Clara table. Going to law school, I really was one of those people that went to law school because I didn't know what else to do. So I didn't have a grand plan to end up in-house, but I was very influenced by being in Silicon Valley and by the IP program here. I ended up going to, as a summer associate to Orrick, Harrington, and Sutcliffe. Got involved in some pre-trial work on a patent litigation. Working for some great lawyers there, Terry McMahon and Bill Anthony. And, you know, I had sort of an epiphany that this is something that I'm very interested in, and that this, if you want to do IP law, this is the place to do it. And so pretty much after that summer, I decided I wanted to be involved in IP in some way, shape, or form. And that was, you know, around 98, so the first .com bubble was in full force then. So I was a patent litigator for 5 years at Orrick. I moved to White & Case and worked with some excellent lawyers there, including Steve Heminger, as he mentioned, again, doing patent law. I never really intended to go in-house. I was actually pretty happy with the track my career was on. I did enjoy fighting and litigating, so I wasn't really looking for a change. But we were actually hired for Facebook's first patent case, and through the process of working on that case and defending depositions of some of the executives at Facebook, I was, you know, offered a job to go in-house there. They didn't have anyone in-house that really had any experience with IP. I was hired by, at that time, there wasn't even a general counsel. I was hired by the CFO, Gideon Yu, who now happens to be the president of the 49ers, so I'm looking forward to possibly hearing from him at some point again. And so I went to you know, a pretty nascent in-house legal department at Facebook. I was the 5th lawyer there, like I said, the first IP lawyer, and it was a difficult decision to leave the firm where, I mean, you could tell me if I'm wrong, Steve. I think I had a decent reputation at White & Case. I could be wrong about that. So I thought I had a pretty good career path there. But there was something that appealed to me about being at a startup and diversifying beyond just doing patent litigation. And Facebook, you know, it's pretty clear even then that we were going to have a lot of legal issues. So I was able to take that opportunity, and you know, I'm very glad that I did, not just because it's an extremely interesting company, but because of the opportunity that it's given me to diversify and to expand from just doing IP litigation to being responsible for all the IP there, and also doing so in a pretty crazy environment of hyper growth and a lot of scrutiny and things like that. So I did not have a grand plan to end up where I am, but I'm certainly happy that I did.
Who played you in the movie? If you're
I'm not sure about that. You'll be surprised to know the movie's not extremely accurate. But
that was obvious from the first viewing of the movie, so that was interesting. Just a couple of comments here. I just find this played out so many times in looking at successful individuals. The paths are sometimes serendipitous. They depend on fortune and luck or accident, often and leading to these sort of positions, and also the importance of mentors along the way. And one of the things that we tell our students with some frequency is the importance of finding mentors, to find people who you respect and admire to help you through your careers as you get started in it. So it's nice to see this played out with this distinguished group of counsel. A question here that I think will be interesting to many in this room, and I'll start off in reverse order here and ask Sam to think about this and respond. What are the 2 or 3 or more, if you want, considerations that go into your decision on hiring an outside firm to do work for the company or to assist you in work that you do, a piece of litigation, a transaction, a project, or what have you? What are you thinking about when you pick up the yellow pages? They still have yellow pages, and or whatever source.
Facebook page.
Facebook page, that's it. And think about who you'd like to talk to about a major project that you have.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the first and foremost is the lawyer or the firm, known for the particular type of work that we're in need of. I think that's the most obvious component of it. I tend to hire people that I know, or people that come recommended from people that I know, just because reputation is pretty reliable indicator of sort of the quality and attention that you're going to get. Also, I think Facebook is sort of a unique company in that it's a young company. When I got there, the CEO was 23 years old, and most of the management was around that age as well. And so it takes sort of a different kind of, law firm to be able to understand in some ways, the company is very naive when it came to legal issues, particularly IP issues, and that was the area that I was most involved in. So you want a firm that's going to be able to work with young engineers, young executives, make them comfortable, be able to explain and let them understand what the issues are so they can make the decisions they need to make. It's a combination of legal skills, reputation, and then honestly just fit as far as culture. Because if there's not a cultural fit, it makes my life a lot more difficult, because when I'm asking people to participate in anything related to legal, it's taking them away really from what they're there to do and what their day job is. And so I certainly want to make that experience as comfortable as possible.
Thank you. Andrew?
I've had the opportunity to work with counsel and manage counsel at Sony and SAP, and currently at Walmart Global E-commerce. And in my roles, I assume that and expect that all outside counsels are professionally an expert in what they do. So that's the floor qualifications. But above that, which you might be surprised to learn, is that it's very hard to find business savvy lawyers who have good common sense, who have good people skills, and or just basically can get the job done. I find that to be very rare and very hard to find. Once again, fit and culture with the company, lawyers that actually know your business. That's actually very hard to find. We're lucky in the Valley to have lawyers like that. But basically, I think, for most in-house lawyers, we're looking for the fit and the culture. Because finding lawyers who have the technical expertise, I don't think that's hard to find. But finding lawyers who have the technical expertise and the business savvy and the savviness to understand your business and to get the job done, I think that's another level.
Good, thank you. Brian?
I think those are excellent points. I'll just add 2 observations. The first is that the strength of the overall team is important. I would think that that disappointment with the firm, any disappointment I've had with any of our law firms over the past couple of years, have been around the fact that while I'm satisfied with the lead attorney's expertise and maybe cultural fit, then that sort of ended with the engagement partner, and that the rest of the team was not up to speed in that regard. And so we hire teams, and we need confidence in the teams. So it's from associates on up, and sometimes the associates aren't invited to the get-to-know-you lunch, the lunch where we describe our business and so on, and I think that leaves a gap with the team. And so we hire as much for our team as we do for the particular expertise that the lead attorney is expected to. And then I guess it probably wouldn't be a good general counsel unless I talked about some of the process issues as well. I saw a survey recently which surveyed general counsels or in-house counsels, and it asked, what are the top reasons why you switched out from a law firm that had been in place? And the things that come to the top of that list still astonish me. Things like responsiveness and billing issues and so on and so forth. And it seems to me that we still haven't gotten that right yet. And the problem with that is that that's what I think has ushered in this idea of RFPs, of alternative billing arrangements, because those are trust gap fillers, right? If you don't have trust in the team to be predictable and to be communicative and so on, you rely on other process things like fixed fees and so on and so forth. And I think that's too bad. So I think that that's an area which I still don't think that we have succeeded in. And firms work so hard to develop business, and it seems like those service issues are what ultimately get in the way, and that's really unfortunate.
Great, thank you. Sharon, you have some ideas to share here?
Yeah, I think I would agree with all of the points that have been made. There's one other or two other points I would make. One is Applied is always looking for practical advice, and if we receive I'm going to say a 10-page memo, but even a 3-page memo, if we can't get it down to a page, nobody is going to pay attention in the just the world of 1,000 emails a day. If we don't get the attention of a decision maker like that, forget it. So practical advice that we can apply is paramount for us. And then I just have to say, cost is a huge issue for Applied. We are always looking at how can we take out costs with respect to our legal fees. And so that has led us to look at some firms that we ordinarily, in years past, may not have looked at. We have gone from some very big firms to some smaller firms and made some decisions on, what is the cost-benefit analysis for the company. We're not going to necessarily hire a premier employment litigation firm that has a nationwide reputation if we can get by with excellent work from a smaller firm that's local, who is likely, much more knowledgeable and much more has much more of a interaction with local plaintiffs' attorneys. So those are some additional points that I would add to the rest of the panel.
Great, thank you. My next question has been partially responded to, I think, with some of the responses to the last question, but I think it gets at a couple of important issues, I think issues of importance to many members of our audience here today. And that's really to ask your advice on their behalf. What do you think the most effective ways for law firms and their lawyers to build or strengthen their relationships with with in-house counsel? It's kind of a different look, slightly different look at the last question, but it really asks for your advice to someone who has worked with you in the past and is looking for a way to make that relationship stronger, more enduring, and on their part more successful. So let me ask Andrew maybe to take the lead on that.
Sure. Kind of echoing on the same thoughts I had earlier, which is know our business. Know our business and actually, have a relationship with us. I find so many lawyers only contact us when they think a real business billable opportunity is present, as opposed to developing the relationship first, knowing the business first, and then when the opportunity comes, it's natural and organic.
Please, go ahead.
I guess if I was at a law firm, I'd be wondering, okay, let's say I'm not one of your incumbent law firms. Are there opportunities for me to learn your business with your assistance, or should I do it from the outside? I mean, how is it that they should become a student of the business?
So I'm particularly impressed with many of the law firms in the Valley who are out there in the community. They get out, they sponsor events, they meet other lawyers. How else are you going to meet other in-house lawyers? For example, the Asian bar community has over 200 in-house lawyers, and when we have an event, it's 100 in-house lawyers representing over 85 in-house companies. They're there, they're present, they make contacts, they have relationships. You meet the lawyers, you have coffee with them, you get to know them, and don't pitch business. Just get to know them as an individual. And over time, you actually have a relationship with them, and when a business opportunity comes up, you have an organic relationship. I've also had coffee with a lawyer for the first time ever, and they spent the whole entire time pitching business. Obviously we all are in-house and we all have contacts. We've worked double-digit years in-house. We're not going to pick up the phone and hire the lawyer we do not know. We have contacts in the area already. So get to know us. There's plenty of opportunities to get to know us by getting out there. And it's shame on the law firms that are not out there in the community.
Sam, you have some advice?
Win. That's like the bottom line for us is results. Getting the opportunity is one thing, but to strengthen the relationship, the firms we work with are the firms that win cases, the firms that close deals, the firms that, prosecute patents, how we want to prosecute it and get results. It's a very results-oriented business in general, and the legal department's no exception. It really just comes down to performing and doing it, in a way that's, fiscally responsible. So the firms that have the most success with us and the deepest relationships are the ones that get results with the financial deals that we can sustain. That's really the bottom line for us. As I said, knowing the culture and building relationships and all that's extremely important too. But I think that kind of goes along with being effective. Is that goes along with the territory.
Good. Sharon?
Yeah, I would agree that winning is good. I would say one of the things that has impressed me really in the last 2 years is with a new firm that we've started working with. I called just to ask a question, and I had a brief discussion with the partner, and the next day he sent me a one-page summary and said, look, I was thinking more about what you asked me, and we actually did a couple hours research, and here's where we think the issues are, and here's where we think you might run into some speed bumps, and we're not going to charge you for it. And it was beautifully written. It was extremely helpful in helping us kind of get to the meat of the issues. And for many of us, and I hopefully I'm not speaking just for me, but I do manage a worldwide group, so I'm on the phone late with Asia, I'm on the phone early with Europe, I'm managing my U.S. folks during the day. Doing research or really thinking through a problem, I have to literally block my calendar off. I need answers quickly, and I need to get people information quickly. So getting this was like, it was like manna from heaven for me. And then, we ultimately thought the research was so good, we said, of course, we're going to pay you for it. But the offer went a huge, long way with us, and the fact that they did it on their own initiative was also a beautiful thing. So,
I've often thought that moving in-house was moving from law firm was moving from being a plastic surgeon to the MASH unit.
Right.
And so, just keep the patient alive kind of mentality. And so sometimes those beautiful long memos, you just think, I wish I had the luxury of, fixing my nose, but I don't. So I would just add two things that I'm surprised how many firms really don't seem to go after voice of the customer data to sort of, incumbent firms having surveys that they just say, how are we doing? And not, the managing partner or the relationship partner sitting down with the general counsel over lunch and saying, hey, didn't we do a great job? Send in your biz dev people and just do a phone interview or something where we can say, these are the things that are bothering us, and then, hatching a plan to address those things. I'm surprised how many people don't do that. I think that the assumption is, if we're not squawking, it's okay. But the truth of the matter is sometimes I don't have time to squawk. Mm-hmm. And so it builds up, and then at some point we just say, I've had it, and then that's a big surprise. So I think that the firms could be a little bit more proactive with getting voice of the customer data. The other thing is that I love when some firms take interest in my more junior lawyers and their careers and invite them to speak on panels and get them involved with, associate retreats or speak at firm functions or something like that. I think that to me sends a great signal that you're worried about my team and not just your point of contact, the GC or somebody else that's hiring you.
Terrific. Let me pose a little broader question, moving from some specific issues about hiring, retaining outside firms to assist. And this goes to some questions I know everyone in the room thinks about here a lot, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about the general business climate here and we could say in the nation, or certainly in Silicon Valley and California. How has that business climate affected how you work with outside counsel, your billing expectations, your concerns for costs? And somewhat related to that, do you think that corporate clients are causing law firms to change how they do business in rather fundamental ways? Thoughts on that? And I'll ask Brian perhaps to respond first.
Yeah, as I said earlier, I'm not a huge fan of some of the alternative billing arrangements. I'd much rather have a trust-based relationship with my law firm so that there's predictability based on trust rather than an RFP or some document where we can point to and say, well, you're exceeding your budget and so on. But unfortunately, I think the business climate has pushed legal services into the procurement departments, the procurement department mode. And so, as it's a big spend, a big cost center within the company, we're being expected to be as efficient as possible. That's the new contract, that maybe not new contract, but that certainly is the contract with the company, that when we go out to hire, we're doing it in the most efficient manner. Of course, winning is important, but in that context, it's assumed that we're going to win, just do it the most efficient way. And I think that, that's tough. I try to stay away from, RFPs and bidding and so on, but the procurement mentality, I think, has really taken hold on the legal profession. And I think law firms are stepping up to that. There are very few of them will not engage in a discussion about alternative billing arrangements, and some have made it a best practice. And I think that when we need to go that direction, you really see where some of the firms have done well there.
Great. Sharon, do you have some thoughts on business climate and its effect on firms and relationships?
Yes. So I will say that the business climate has definitely, at least for applied materials, changed how we look at our relationships with, long-standing law firms long-term relationships that we've had with law firms. We are always looking for ways to cut costs. We do look at alternative billing ideas. Sometimes they've proven to be, not entirely addressing the issue, and sometimes they've addressed the issue beautifully. I do think on some level, in Silicon Valley, I say this all the time, we live in a bubble. The business climate is not necessarily as poor as it is in other parts of the country. And we have centers elsewhere in the country, not only in Santa Clara, but in Texas and on the East Coast and even up north in Montana. So, we look at local firms and, when we see the difference in the prices that we pay outside of Silicon Valley, it's astounding, the difference. So we've had several instances where people have left big firms and started their own smaller law firms, and we've often gone with those people because they are winners. They know our business, we have good relationships with them, and they cost just, a heck of a lot less. So I will say that we spend a lot of our time at Applied, not a lot, but, enough time talking about, fueling the big firms, and, that the system has to start to give a little bit, because there's a lot of overhead in big firms, and it's very difficult on the corporate client.
Great. Andrew?
I pretty much agree with everything Brian says regarding billing and outside counsel practices. I'm going to comment on the business climate. issue. I've been fortunate enough to work in companies at the right time, at the right place. I was at PlayStation when they were golden. I was at SAP when they are golden. They're the most valued company in Germany. And now I've joined global e-commerce, Walmart, this year recently. And all three companies, we are experiencing tremendous growth. Personally, for me, the outside counsel firms that I'm working with, frankly, are just not keeping up with my demands. So we are just gangbusting busy. And business climate-wise, for at least Walmart Global E-commerce, is that the global e-commerce world and market and industry is exploding, and we find our industry on a very high growth pattern.
Sam.
Yeah, and obviously Facebook's been on a high growth pattern as well since I got there, about 4.5 years ago. So it's not so much the macro business climate as it is our own unique circumstances. And I think more of a fan than Brian is of alternative fee arrangements, and that's just because I think early on we basically worked with firms that were good, but also that were willing to sort of invest in the company and do alternative arrangements that were necessary because we couldn't pay full boat at that time. And the combination of that willingness to kind of invest in us and getting good results has meant that we've they've taken a risk. We've even done deals that are all-you-can-eat deals where we pay just a flat rate for everything that comes in the door for, like, say, all patent litigation. And because they did a good job and because they invested in us, in return, we've continued to work with them over the years, and we now pay them a lot more than we were able to 4 years ago. And so it's been, I think, the willingness to take that risk and the willingness to entertain alternative fee arrangements has been essential for us and a good business decision, I think, for those firms long term. So we've done every kind of flat fee, capped fee, staged, discounts, hourly discounts. We do everything, basically. So it just depends on the circumstances.
Terrific. Well, let's switch a little bit to a topic that may be of some interest to some people in this group here. And we've talked about the business climate and how law firms are responding to the business climate as it affects your corporations, your organizations. Are you anticipating hiring more lawyers for your office? One of the things that is discussed nationally is a growing trend to having more robust, larger corporate counsel office, doing a lot more of the work that traditionally was, in a sense, kind of farmed out or secured by working with law firms. So let me ask you about your anticipated hiring for attorneys in your office, and if that's part of your growth pattern, what sort of experience or practice areas do you anticipate looking for? And do you think some of this is a part of a general uptick in legal work in Silicon Valley? So multiple questions. I failed the evidence test again, so pick and choose or respond to them. So what are your thoughts about this? And Sharon?
Sure. So as I mentioned in the opening remarks, we have a new general counsel, so I have no idea what he would like to do. But if I had a crystal ball, I would say that the hiring for applied would be in the IP area, and I think also we are always looking for excellent in-house counsel in Asia, and beefing up our in-house regional attorneys. I think that we're pretty well staffed in Santa Clara, but again, I think we're sort of view that everything is on the table right now. And so I may not be the right person with the crystal ball on that one.
Okay. So I'm assuming one aspect of this is what the big term for it is cross-cultural competencies, being able to work in multiple cultural settings, legal settings, professional settings.
Absolutely.
This is a trait that is important.
At applied, it absolutely is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Brian, your thoughts on
Yeah, I think
hiring?
much like applied, we're more of in a cyclical kind of business, and so staffing is tough to deal with, particularly within the cycles. I would say globalization, the increased focus on work outside of the U.S. would inform or would cause us to do hiring rather than anything in the sort of local business environment.
Okay. Sam, some thoughts on that? What's down the road? What's in the future?
Yeah, so I mean, we're still growing pretty substantially. Like I said, when I started, we had 5 people in the legal department in 2008, and now we have 65, and we'll probably be 90 by the end of next year. And that's more of a function of just the growth of the company. We try to stay lean, but like I said, we do have a lot of legal issues, so we need a lot of help. The IP group has grown a lot specifically. But we're not that mature of a company or a legal department where we've thought about, for example, bringing litigation in-house or, prosecuting in-house. We're still in a mode where the in-house folks are mostly managing outside counsel. Right. We do a lot of our own deals, obviously, a lot of our commercial deals and a lot of our acquisitions, transactions, things like that ourselves. But other than that, I just don't see us being in a position in the near future to, as a cost-saving measure, trying to replace outside firms with inside folks.
Okay. And Andrew, your thoughts on that?
Yes, we're definitely growing. Walmart globally has about 145 lawyers, but the e-commerce division, which is based actually in Silicon Valley, in San Bruno, across the street from YouTube, we had a couple of years ago we were 300 people. Now we have 1,700 people. I was the 3rd lawyer hired, and we have 7 lawyers now, and we definitely anticipate growth in the area of IP and e-commerce.
Great. Question that I thought of that I ask frequently as I meet our graduates or others in the community, and I get this question too from other law school deans, for example. Is there something that's really unique about Silicon Valley and the lawyers who practice law? All of your companies do business, and therefore you have legal issues around the world. You're dealing with business environments and lawyers servicing those legal environments throughout the world. Do you think that there's something kind of unique about this valley, particularly what it expects in knowledge and sophistication of its lawyers? Are we in kind of a special place, or is it just the weather? Andrew, what do you think?
All the above, obviously. I mean, if you've worked in legal companies and or law firms who have offices in other areas, you often hear, either positive or negative connotations of the same concept, which is we're the rogue, crazy, innovative lawyers in California and the West Coast. So, I hear this all the time in-house and from all my various satellites and parent corporations, is that the lawyers in the West Coast or Silicon Valley are often either described as very rogue or very crazy or creative or innovative, many adjectives, but essentially they add up to the fact that we're different. We think differently, we're innovative, we're problem solvers, and we're actually business lawyers, unlike many other lawyers elsewhere, period. And that's because we grow up in this bubble here.
Okay, thank you. Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, being in IP in a tech company, so I would certainly say that, the lawyers here are more adept at handling sort of IP issues for companies like Facebook, just I think because of the environment, because they have similar clients. So, I mean, I think it's changing. I think there are a lot of lawyers in other places that are certainly becoming more competitive and understanding sort of the culture and the business here. But this is sort of the epicenter for things like, not Texas notwithstanding, for patent litigation and for other IP related issues and transactional things, and just folks that just have been around the Valley, I think, there's a sort of an extra benefit to hiring people who've seen it all before. It's helpful.
Great. Brian, what do you think?
Yeah, I actually think that the Silicon Valley, to me, is such a, it has some, the legal departments here are uniquely positioned as strategic forces within the companies. And why is that? I think this can go back to how the technology companies are incubated here. And they oftentimes are advised through the IPO process by lawyers, outside counsel, luminaries in the bar, who position the legal department as strategic. I think that has given sort of a foothold to this idea of a strategic in-house department that strives to be business partners. And I think that's where this culture within the Valley, this unique culture within the Valley, actually is where it's derived.
Great. Thank you. Sharon, your thoughts on how special we are?
We are special. Yeah, I think that I agree with most of what everybody has said here. I do think that there's also just an inherent drive and desire to get to winning that I find with most in-house counsel that I know in Silicon Valley. When we have acquired companies where we have acquired in-house attorneys with the company, their skills are excellent, but there is a culture shift for them when they come in-house with the headquarters in Santa Clara, and that is, that we are very service-oriented, that we are, willing to go the extra mile, regardless of personal cost, I should say, unfortunately. But there is, I think, a real inherent drive, at least to the people that are attracted to serving some of the technology companies.
Yeah. We've been facing some of those issues as we look at our curriculum at the law school. As I mentioned, we have a lot of our graduates that stay in the area. They have opportunities with leading law firms and companies in the area. So we're curious, is it enough to know contracts, property, torts, and maybe have a trial ad course? And what our research and discussions have found is that that's clearly not sufficient here, and maybe in other areas, that there are competencies that new lawyers need to work in teams and groups, to be able to facilitate or foster manage projects. Leadership is a skill, that competency we've been developing in our curriculum, and that's responsive to what our graduates are finding the skills they need to have to work in firms that work for you. And a lot of the reasons we're seeing this is that the drivers are the corporate counsel office. They're expecting lawyers to be able to work effectively with engineers, to have problem solving and teamwork sessions that lead to an efficient outcome. So we're trying to, in effect, kind of move beyond the paradigm ourselves, and a lot of the drivers for that, the information we're finding, has been from corporate counsel like the ones on this panel. So we continue to learn from that. So I'm going to pick your brain here a little bit on behalf of all of us here and ask you, what do you think the hot topics are, the hot legal issues that you're facing or that you foresee in your futures, your organization's futures, and certainly that in some of the firms? Privacy, globalization, increasing growth of use of arbitration. What are the hot issues that you all anticipate? Sam, I'm going to start with you this round.
So for Facebook, obviously privacy has been a pretty hot button issue, and we've, sort of been, I think, at the forefront at kind of addressing that from a legal perspective, and also structuring our department to be able to deal with those issues. For me personally, it's obviously IP and specifically patents. I think there's obviously over the past 10 years there's been a big shift in sort of how people approach patents and what patent litigations look like. There's a lot of money being invested in sort of IP holding companies, and private equity firms are picking up companies just for their IP. And so there's this, entire industry that's being built around assertions of patents that has nothing to do with building products or, supporting a company's core sort of business model. The business model is IP. And so I think the challenge is how to deal with that. How to deal with the influx of cases. We have a growing number of patent infringement cases, and whereas if you have an operating company that chooses to sue you, Having your own portfolio is obviously a lot of leverage in responding to that, and so you have to be prepared for those types of situations, and we've had some of those, including one on the eve of our IPO. But when you're talking about companies that are not operating companies and don't really have any skin in the game, it's a challenge to deal with those economically, but at the same time, they can be potentially very high stakes. And so I'm concerned about the amount of investment that's going into companies whose sole purpose is basically to extract money from companies that actually build things.
And there's a term for that I've learned since I've been here.
Several terms.
Sharon, what do you think? What are the hot button issues?
Well, I think
looking down the line?
for our industry, it's really consolidation. We have very few competitors and we have very few customers anymore. So that sort of leads to IP, trade secret misappropriation, issues of that nature that we are grappling with. So I think that as an employment lawyer, I don't see there's not a huge amount of issues in the U.S. that are of major concern for us. We obviously comply with discrimination and affirmative action and a variety of other things outside of the U.S. with respect to employment law, dealing with works councils, dealing with trade unions, and the various new changes to employment laws in the PRC presents challenges both in describing and explaining them to executives here in the United States and then complying with them ultimately. Lastly, the other area I think is governance. Corporate governance is a big area as well, where we, with the influx of new laws and legislation with respect to various requirements with respect to disclosures, et cetera, I see that as another area where we have a lot of work and where we don't see any downturn with respect to incoming.
Andrew?
Since I'm in the e-commerce area, my comments are pretty much the same as Sam's. I just want to add one additional thought is that it will be interesting to see how the government from the federal and the state respond in the areas of privacy and patent reform, because that's obviously going to shape how industries are going to operate.
Okay. And Brian?
Yeah, for me, it's globalization and compliance globally, because the issues are converging. Every country or region has privacy laws, antitrust laws, but the way that the regulations handle those actually are diverging. It used to be that you could just, as long as you were complying with U.S. laws, that you were probably hitting everybody else, and that's just simply no longer the case. Mm-hmm. The privacy laws, I think, are the best example where, everyone eyes are open that there's special things to do in Europe, and now the next wave is there's a lot of special things you need to be doing in Asia. Mm-hmm. And for, I think, legal departments, particularly smaller legal departments, that's tough. And I think that having a partner with outside law firms on trying to manage that global compliance matrix we'll be spending a lot of time on. On the IP front, for me, I think that the connected society sort of brings new problems in terms of what devices want access to our network and how I keep track of what's going onto people's cell phones, iPads, PCs, laptops. I mean, it used to be pretty simple because it was a company PC, and then you could basically watch what was going on there. Now it's going to so many different devices connected to the network, and making sure that you keep an eye on the trade secrets and the IP. That's really a tough challenge. I think that one's going to be one that lots of best practices need to be discussed to try to figure that out.
Yeah, the other place we see the globalization thing at Facebook is that we have such a massive amount of user-generated content, and the laws they diverge massively from jurisdiction to jurisdiction about what are your duties as far as policing that or taking things down or, defamation and privacy and things like that. So I totally agree with that comment.
A question dear to my heart, what advice would you give to current law students or recent graduates about opportunities, career choices for them? And one answer that's not permitted is don't go to law school. Seriously, I'd be interested in your thoughts about what sort of advice you would give to young lawyers, new prospective lawyers. And I'll ask Sharon.
So from my perspective, I think that it's critical that a new lawyer or young lawyer finds an area that they're passionate about. And that might be, you may have heard that a million times, but I really think that for the long run, with respect to a career, you have to find passion in your career, or it can become repetitive and less interesting on a day-to-day basis. I also think that, at least my experience and the lawyers that I mainly work with, that we really look for law firm experience. And so going to a law firm and cutting your teeth at a law firm is important. It would be very hard to come in-house, I think, at Applied without having that as a basis.
Andrew?
For a lot of law students and young lawyers, many of them don't necessarily have a passion. They just ended up in law school or ended up in a law firm, and that's just where they ended up at. My advice is to get to know as many senior folks as possible so that you never know where your roads take you and what doors open. You may be doing, discovery or litigation today, but if you get to know folks in IP or in just a completely different field of law, that may open windows or may, light a light bulb for you that you've never thought you had a passion for. And it may open doors that you never thought would open for you.
Terrific. Thank you. Brian, what do you think?
Well, one thing that I did that I thought was particularly helpful was I had an objective to become a general counsel, and then enlisted the advice of search professionals or headhunters to sort of identify where the gaps are. Could I be looked at for a GC job given my current state of my resume? And had some great advice in terms of where the gaps were and how to address them, so that I could get to the interview. And I think that those search professionals aren't really used that way, but they're a great source of information in terms of gaps. But also just broadening your experiences. I think lots of our law school graduates may not be finding the exact job that they're looking for right out of law school. Certainly I have this conversation with my students at Buffalo Law School. But what I say to them is that it's important to just leave a trail of success. So whatever you're doing, be successful at it. And while it may not be exactly what you're looking for, it's important to just leave a trail of success. Or create a brand of success for yourself, and then that will build on things. I think oftentimes those people get discouraged, the students get discouraged, and sort of get caught up on, am I on my path or not? And I try to counsel them that, just being successful and diving into what you're doing, whatever's in front of you, whatever opportunities you have, is the most important thing.
And Sam, your thoughts on?
Yeah, I agree with all the comments that the panelists made. The only thing I would add is, and this is, cliche, but it's probably cliche because it's true, which is, I would be, it's sort of along the lines with what Brian is saying as far as building a brand. I would, be very conscious of how you treat other people that you work with in every single context. I mean, I always heard when I was in law school that the legal community is a very small community, the Valley is a very small place. And unfortunately, now I'm old enough to actually see that playing out. And it's actually surprising to me because I thought it was not really true because I didn't know anybody, obviously, when I was in law school.
You didn't
but
think
now,
your professors were being straight with you?
So I mean, it's important because you never know when you're going to run across these people and what position they're going to be in, and whether you may need something from them, they may need something from you. So I think it's pretty important. I mean, your reputation follows you everywhere, and I think it's good to be conscious of that. That it's not just a cliche. It proves to be true if you're around long enough.
Terrific. For our last question, I thought I would get personal here a little bit with our four panelists and ask them about obviously very busy, successful individuals who have moved in successful career paths to very important positions, but there is that other part of their day, and that is their personal life. So I'd like to know how they maintain their work-life balance, work-personal life, I guess, balance. If they do, maybe they don't. We can find out. And related to that, I think are there any things that keep you up at night that you think about at 2 in.the morning, as that expression goes? Let me ask Sharon maybe to start off with that balance in your life.
Yes. So always working at it, I would say. I do have 2 young children, so I'm very committed to being home at a certain time. And I have, as part of my brand, everybody understands that 6 to 8:30 is, sacrosanct with me. It's dinner time, bath time, bedtime. And then they can get me from 8:30 p.m. until 6:15 a.m. When we start the process in the reverse, and that's getting up and getting dressed and getting out the door. So I think it's extremely important from my perspective, at least, that my children, I had children to be a parent and not to be some far-off vision of a parent. But, some things suffer. Sometimes my work suffers, sometimes my family suffers, and, we have to make choices every day. So from my perspective, setting specific boundaries and attempting to keep them has been important, and I want to underscore, bold, and highlight attempt. And then what keeps me awake at night? I'm so exhausted. There's very little that keeps me up at night. So I sleep very well, but I shoot awake at 4:45 every morning. And I don't think about things at night, but I do think about them in the shower. And that is, there's no, overhanging huge concern, but kind of getting out the door and getting excellent work to the people that I serve.
Great, thank you. Andrew?
I'm very happily married. My husband and I are legally one of the few individuals legally married in California. He is a prosecutor, and we have no kids, so we direct all of our frustration, aspirations, and dreams to our community. We're very involved with our community, legal and non-legal, and some of the issues that keep me up is that I'm very interested in diversity in the legal profession, diversity at the higher levels, and diversity in the bench. And just empowering minorities and women of color and people of color.
Good, thank you. Brian.
I think Sharon stated well the way that you sort of have to set boundaries, but otherwise you're expected to be on, at all other times, which is tough. And I think we share this with everyone in this room. I mean, with the way it's just expected that you're connected. And people get mad when you don't respond between 3:30 and 4 in the morning, but you have to set expectations. I would say to the question of what keeps me up at night, I've done a lot of work in the area of ethics and the ethical issues that Inside Counsel face, and I've reached just one conclusion about how to manage those issues, and that is to pick a ethical company, to pick the right company to work for. Because once you're in the ethical issues, there's really no easy way out. And so I believe I have picked the right company. I have absolute trust in my management team, and I think it's that allows me to sleep at night. And I think that anyone that, especially in-house counsel that are in the process of evaluating their company or looking for work, they really should do their due diligence. I think too often we're on show to try to get a job, but interviewing the company for its culture, interviewing its company for what, and asking the question, can I work here and can I sleep at night here, I think is really important. And for me, I believe I've done that.
Wonderful. And Sam, your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I don't have much to add other than just to echo that, it's the work-life balance, and you have to, I've always been pretty good at it, actually, but you have to actually make it a priority and look at it as being just as important as your job. And for me, I'm not effective if I'm working all the time. I'm much more efficient if I actually have downtime and do other things. So it's really been, rather than a sort of tug of war, it's actually been beneficial, I think, to my career to be committed to spending time with my family and doing things outside of work. As far as what keeps me up at night, not much other than maybe the stock price, other than that.
So you've been sleeping well the last week, huh? Well, that's wonderful. I'd like to, as we're concluding here, thank our panelists for their candid and insightful comments. I hope that we were able to identify the same questions that you had when you came here and thought about the questions you'd like to add to pose to these individuals. If not, you have a chance afterwards, grab a cup of coffee, certainly, and take a minute and ask that question for our speakers here. I also, as we close here, and I know James has some concluding remarks, we have a table there in the back. If anyone needs to register for continuing education credits, please stop by and see Joni and Nancy at the back table. And how about a round of applause for our panelists?